My name is Ethan. I'm 46 years old, and 6 months ago my life looked like a perfectly engineered structure of order, success and trust. But perfection is a lie we tell ourselves so we don't have to stare into the abyss right in front of us. We were having dinner on our 15th wedding anniversary when she slowly placed her fork on the plate, looked me straight in the eyes without blinking, and said the words that shattered my reality. "Ethan, I want us to have an open relationship. You're no longer enough for me, and honestly, there's already someone else filling that space." In that split second, the wine in my glass stopped shining, and the air grew heavy, almost solid. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She calmly admitted she had been cheating on me for months, and that now, out of honesty, she wanted my permission to keep sleeping with her lover while I continued paying the bills and keeping the house running. What she didn't know, as she watched my face remain completely still, was that in that exact moment I stopped being her husband and became her silent executioner. She expected begging, jealousy, or a humiliating negotiation, but all I saw was an opportunity to deliver the justice life sometimes forgets to hand out. If you like stories where betrayal has consequences and justice arrives without warning, hit like and subscribe. Here, we share real stories of revenge and lessons no one forgets. To understand how we ended up at that dinner, I need to explain who I was and what my marriage to Elena represented. I've always been a man of numbers and logic. I work as a senior wealth management consultant. My entire life revolves around analyzing risk, anticipating moves, and securing the future. I applied that same mindset to my home. For 15 years, I believed I was building a fortress. We had a designer house, 2 high-end cars in the garage, and a routine that ran like a Swiss watch. I was the provider, the pillar, the man who solved every problem before she even realized it existed. Elena is 10 years younger than me. She was always magnetic, the kind of woman who lights up a room just by walking into it. When we met, I promised myself she would never lack anything, and I kept that promise. She didn't have to worry about budgets, debt, or retirement plans. I handled everything. I believed that kind of financial and emotional security was the purest language of love. I was wrong. Too much comfort is the perfect breeding ground for boredom and betrayal. Over the last year, I started noticing subtle changes, gestures that an untrained eye would miss, but I make my living by catching details. Elena began going to the gym with unusual frequency, refreshing her wardrobe with lingerie that never made it into our bedroom, and guarding her phone like it contained state secrets. Many times, when I walked into the living room, I found her texting with a smile that vanished the moment our eyes met. I'm not an impulsive man. I didn't grab her phone or start a scene. I stayed on the perimeter, observing. She assumed my silence was ignorance, or complacency. She saw me as that solid, boring piece of furniture that would always be there holding up the structure of her life, while she chased excitement elsewhere. She treated me with a patronizing kindness, the way you treat a grandfather who no longer understands the modern world. In the mornings, before leaving for the office, I watched her have breakfast. She avoided prolonged eye contact, sticking to trivial comments about the garden or plans for the week. I nodded, drank my black coffee, and logged every micro-expression of guilt she tried to hide behind her perfect wife mask. The balance was broken, but the facade remained intact. I kept paying the credit cards that showed charges from boutique hotels and romantic dinners at times, when she was supposedly at yoga class. You might wonder why I didn't confront her right away. The answer is simple. In my world, if you move too fast, you lose your advantage. I needed her to feel safe, to believe I was the biggest fool alive. I wanted her overconfidence to become her own noose. I watched her walk through the house with the certainty of someone who believed herself untouchable, planning her next escape while I sat in my home office reviewing our joint accounts and the properties that were legally in my name. Emotionally, the house felt like a mausoleum, silent and controlled. I kept up appearances. I opened her car door, sent flowers to her workplace, and reminded her how much I valued our stability. She replied with mechanical kisses and a distant gaze. I knew that to her, I was no longer a man. I was an ATM with feelings. This could be any one of you. The man who works hard, who believes respect is earned through provision and loyalty, while the person sleeping beside him is counting the minutes until he leaves so she can call someone else. I finally understood that our relationship wasn't a partnership. It was a parasite feeding off its host. She enjoyed my last name, my status, and my money, but gave her passion to a stranger who never had to worry about paying the bills. That anniversary dinner wasn't a surprise to me. I knew she was going to propose something. Her arrogance had convinced her that I loved her so much I would accept any scrap of affection just to avoid losing her. She believed my fear of loneliness outweighed my dignity. After 15 years, she still didn't know me at all. That night, after her confession, the silence at the table was absolute. Elena looked at me with a mix of pity and defiance. Her proposal of an open relationship wasn't an invitation to talk. It was an ultimatum wrapped in modern terminology. With a coldness that sent a chill through me, she explained that her lover was a younger guy, someone who made her feel alive in ways my financial stability and calm temperament apparently never could. "I don't want a divorce, Ethan," she said, wiping the corner of her mouth with a napkin. "You're a good man, a great provider, but I need more. He gives me excitement. You give me security. We can be a modern team." I felt a tight pressure in my chest, but I didn't let my hands shake. The betrayal wasn't just the sex. It was the absolute contempt for my dignity. She was asking me to bankroll her affair, to keep a roof over her head while she brought another man's scent into our bed. My response was a simple nod. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. I wanted her to believe she had broken me, that her blow had left me incapable of reacting. The days that followed were a descent into the hell of daily humiliation. Empowered by what she saw as my submission, Elena stopped hiding. She began taking late-night calls, laughing softly on the balcony. One afternoon, I came home early and found a leather jacket that wasn't mine draped over the entryway couch. She walked out of the kitchen, fixing her hair, and gave me a cynical smile before casually saying that he had just left. The injustice burned. I had built that entire world for her. Every brick of our house, every trip, every piece of jewelry was the result of my overtime, my stress, my strategic decisions. And now she treated our home like a stopover hotel for her lover, a man who, according to my discreet research, barely had $1 to his name. He was a gym instructor, drowning in debt with a history of scamming older women. My anger was silent, a blue flame, steady and precise. There were no screams, no broken plates. While she went out at night, perfumed and radiant, I stayed in my office, staring at the shadows on the wall. I felt exiled from my own life. The home that had once been my refuge had become hostile territory. She occupied the space with unbearable arrogance, assuming my lack of an outburst meant cowardice. One Saturday morning, as she got ready to spend the weekend away, she looked at me through the mirror while applying lipstick. "I know this is hard for you, Ethan, but it's better this way. Honesty makes us free." She left without waiting for an answer. In that moment, the eviction was symbolic, but final. She was no longer my wife. She was a tenant who had violated every term of the contract. That same night, I sat on her side of the bed. The emptiness didn't hurt. It brought clarity. She thought she had me cornered because, legally, the house and a large portion of my assets were under a joint property regime. She believed that if I tried to kick her out, she'd walk away with half my life without having worked a single day for it. That was her ultimate betrayal, using the legal system to shield herself while stabbing me in the back. She saw me as a savings account that couldn't be closed. She felt protected by the law and by what she assumed was my blind love. What she didn't know was that a man who knows how to manage other people's wealth knows exactly how to make his own disappear before the storm hits. I closed my eyes and mapped the road ahead. The humiliation of seeing her with another man in my own house was the fuel I needed to extinguish any trace of mercy. She wanted an open relationship. I was going to give her a completely open life, but not in the way she imagined. It would be so open that she'd have nowhere to hide when the cold of reality finally hit. The first step in my reconstruction wasn't emotional, it was technical. I contacted Julian, an old college friend who is now one of the most lethal and discreet divorce attorneys in the country. We met in a private windowless office, far from familiar eyes. I laid out the facts with the same cold precision I use to analyze a balance sheet. I wasn't looking for comfort. I wanted a scorched earth strategy. "She wants half of everything, Julian," I said, watching the steam rise from my coffee. "But she won't receive anything beyond the weight of her own decisions." Julian smiled with a professional smirk. The plan required patience. Over the next 3 months, I became a method actor. At home, I remained the submissive, silent husband. I even told Elena I was trying to process the new dynamic, and that for the sake of our peace, I would transfer some of our investments into independent funds so she could have her own cash flow. She lit up with joy. She believed her manipulation had reached its peak. What she didn't realize was that the documents she signed between smiles and fake affection were, in reality, assignments of rights and acknowledgements of debt that shielded my core assets. While she spent her afternoons with her lover, I focused on collecting evidence. I didn't need blurry photos. I hired a professional team that documented every hotel check-in and check-out, every bill paid with my money for that man's luxuries, and every text message where she mocked my stupidity. I had recordings of her admitting she stayed with me purely for financial comfort and that she expected me to keep up the pace a few more years until she could secure substantial alimony. Every night when I came home, she found me reading or working. She asked how I was doing, and I replied with icy calm, "Everything's under control, Elena. Everything is exactly where it needs to be." She went to bed, probably to chat with him, without suspecting that I had already moved 80% of our liquidity into offshore accounts legally established before our marriage or under corporate structures completely beyond her reach. My intelligence wasn't in force, it was in anticipation. I discovered that the lover, that ray of light in her life, had a weakness: greed. Through a third party, I let information reach him that Elena was about to receive a massive inheritance and that she planned to leave him to pursue someone of her new social level. The seed of distrust between them was planted without me ever having to say a single word to either of them. I began dismantling our shared life piece by piece, quietly. I sold stocks, terminated lease agreements in my name, and prepared the ground so that when the gavel finally fell, there wouldn't be a single nail left for her to hang her coat on. This wasn't a burst of anger, it was a life audit. I was removing a toxic asset from my personal portfolio. Patience is a tool very few men my age know how to use. Everyone wants to explode, scream, punch a wall. Not me. I took satisfaction in watching her walk through the house wearing clothes I paid for, planning a future that no longer existed. I sat across from her at dinner, watching her hands move, thinking about how empty those hands would be in a matter of weeks. She saw me as her past, the man she had already outgrown. I saw her as a ghost who didn't yet know she was dead. Julian called me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Everything's ready, Ethan. The documents are certified, the accounts are secured, and the evidence of adultery and financial fraud is on the judge's desk. All that's left is for you to give the signal." That night, when Elena came home smelling of a cheap perfume that wasn't mine, I poured her a glass of wine. She looked radiant, convinced the world was at her feet. "What's the occasion?" she asked, in that melodic voice that once enchanted me. "That today we're celebrating the end of an era, Elena," I replied, looking at her directly for the first time in months. "And the beginning of your new freedom." She laughed, thinking I had finally accepted the open relationship. She had no idea that at the front door, couriers were already waiting with eviction notices and the divorce filing that would leave her, quite literally, on the street. My reconstruction plan wasn't about finding another woman. It was about reclaiming my empire and my self-respect. Justice isn't lightning from the sky. It's a wall you build brick by brick until your enemy has nowhere left to stand. The climax wasn't an explosion. It was a forced injection of reality. While she held her glass of wine, the doorbell rang. It was 8 o'clock at night. Elena frowned, confused. I didn't move. When she opened the door, she found a court officer and 2 broad-shouldered men wearing the uniforms of a moving company. "What is this?" she asked, turning toward me with a nervous laugh. I handed her a thick envelope. It didn't contain flowers. It contained notice of a temporary restraining order and a divorce filing based on dishonest conduct and financial fraud. As she read the first lines, her expression shifted from confusion to a deathly pale. The movers began to enter, but not to take my things. They carried boxes labeled with her name. "You have 1 hour to remove your personal belongings, Elena," I said, keeping my voice flat, almost monotone. "The house is owned by a holding company I just dissolved. Technically, you no longer reside here." "You can't do this," she screamed, finally losing her mask of sophistication. "We're married. Half of this is mine." I stepped closer, invading her personal space just enough for her to feel my presence, without touching her. I pulled out a tablet and showed her the account statements she herself had signed under false pretenses weeks earlier. I showed her photos of her entering hotels, invoices for the gifts she bought her lover with my corporate card, and, most importantly, the money trail she had tried to divert. "You committed financial fraud against the marital estate, Elena. The judge already has proof that you used shared funds to support a third party. In this state, that voids most of your claims. There is no half, only debts, and they now belong to you." At that moment her phone buzzed. It was a message from her lover. I knew exactly what it said because I had orchestrated it myself. Believing she was no longer inheriting anything and that she was facing legal trouble, he had just blocked her everywhere and left town with another woman, one he had told the same story to. Eleanor looked at the screen and collapsed to the floor, sobbing. "He won't answer me. Ethan, please, it was a mistake. I love you." The irony was exquisite. Watching her beg for love after trying to sell me the idea of an open relationship to legitimize her betrayal was the most satisfying payment I could receive. I didn't feel pity. I felt a deep peace, the peace of a system returning to balance. "You don't love me, Elena. You love my bank account and the security I gave you, but, as you so wisely said, honesty makes us free. Now you're free to go to him, or to find a job, something you haven't done in 15 years. The movers finished placing her suitcases on the lawn. She tried to grab my hand, but I stepped aside with a gesture of contained disgust. There was no physical drama, just the sound of the door closing and the click of the electronic lock being reprogrammed in that very moment. I poured myself another glass of wine and sat in my favorite chair. Through the window, I watched her standing on the sidewalk, surrounded by suitcases, as a light rain began to fall. She was desperately making phone calls, but no one answered. Her lover was already hunting for another victim, and her friends, whom I had quietly supplied with proof of her betrayal, weren't taking her calls. She thought I was a predictable weak man. She thought my silence meant submission. But the revenge of an intelligent man isn't shouted. It's executed with surgical precision. She wanted an open life, and now she had it. No roof, no resources, and no safety net, the one I had woven for her for more than a decade. The shine in her eyes was gone, replaced by the terror of someone realizing she had lost everything over a whim. Months later, the dust has settled and the silence in my house is no longer heavy. It's restorative. I heard through others that Elena now lives in a small rented apartment on the outskirts of town, working an administrative job that barely covers her basic expenses. Her lover vanished completely the moment he realized she was no longer the wife of a wealthy man, but a financial burden. The excitement she was chasing turned out to be an invoice far too expensive, one she now pays every month alone. I wouldn't say I'm happy in the traditional sense, but I feel an icy, absolute satisfaction. I've regained full control of my assets, and more importantly of my time. My life is still a structure of order, but this time the foundations are real. There's no room for parasites disguised as partners. I've learned that loyalty can't be bought with provision, and that respect is an asset that must be protected with the same ferocity as an investment account. Sometimes at night, I pour myself a drink and think about that anniversary dinner. I remember the arrogance in her voice when she asked for an open relationship. I realize now it was the best gift she could have given me. Her betrayal was the key that allowed me to step out of a glass cage I had built myself. She thought she was destroying me, but in reality she was handing my freedom back to me. I don't seek reconciliation, nor do I carry explosive resentment. Resentment is for men who still feel something. What I feel is the indifference of someone who closed a bad deal and moved on. Life doesn't have movie-style happy endings. It has logical outcomes. If you sow contempt under the roof of someone who protects you, you can't expect to harvest anything other than cold and solitude. Many men fear confrontation or divorce because they're afraid of losing what they have. I tell them this: what you really lose every day you tolerate disrespect is yourself. And that's the only thing with no recovery price. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's watching life collect its debts. If this story felt as intense to you as it was for me to live it, hit like and tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you're not subscribed yet, turn on the bell so you don't miss the next stories.